Have you ever imagined walking through a world filled with giants? Not dragons, not movie monsters, real animals. Massive elephants, towering mammoths, giant sloths as big as cars. Welcome to the world of Megafauna. Now, my name is Miss Bree, and in case you don't know me, I'm an educator, a farmer, an illustrator, a singer, a grammar nerd, and I raise all sorts of different kinds of animals on my farm. But one of the things I love most is teaching people about all of the rare and endangered animals that are in the world and about lots of other things like history and all sorts of things. But my goal is to do it through the eyes of the animals or through the agricultural view, which I think is fun. So here we go. The word megafauna means giant animals. Mega is giant, fauna is animals. That's right. Scientists usually say that animals that weigh more than about 45 kilograms, that's around 100 pounds, are megafauna. So apparently, if you have like a Newfoundland dog or a Mastiff, congratulations, you own a megafauna. Now, to be fair, this term is usually used more in regards to extra large animals. But for the record, that's about the size of a fifth grader times two. The term was first used in 1876 by a scientist named Alfred Russel Wallace, who studied wildlife all over the world. But megafauna aren't just big, they're powerful forces in nature. And we're going to learn why. What makes them special? Megafauna are sometimes called ecosystem engineers, and they're called that because just by living their lives, eating, walking around, drinking, participating in the world, right? They shape the world around them. Elephants knock down trees, bison graze grasslands, hippos move nutrients from rivers to land. It's so cool. They spread seeds from one place to another. They control plant growth. They help reduce wildfires. They help balance entire ecosystems. Without them, landscapes can completely change. Megafauna usually live a long time. Okay, their lifespans compared to your average animal is usually much, much longer, right? I mean, we know this. Elephants can live as long as a human, if not longer. Giant tortoises, like Galapagos Island tortoises, they can live for hundreds of years, which is amazing. They usually have very few babies in relation to their size, right? Whereas a mouse might have a litter of 10, 12 babies every couple months. An elephant might have one baby every 5 to 10 years, just like your mom. Who knows? It kind of depends. Some of that's choice, some of that is just nature. They also tend to have very few predators because let's be honest, if you were a lion or a cheetah, would you rather go after a 2-ton elephant or would you rather go after a couple of zebra? I'd prefer zebra. I mean, zebras are pretty ferocious on their own, but much more likely to tackle that than an elephant, right? Yeah. So let's keep going. Megafauna help. They're basically nature's big gardeners, right? So, like we said, they move nutrients in their poop. Yeah, really, I know, it's funny. But did you know that animal waste is super important for the ecosystem and for your survival? Yeah, it's the coolest thing ever. And by doing that, they eat trees and bushes, they help reduce wildfires, they spread seeds here and there. Without them, our forests and grasslands would be totally different, and they've already changed. Now, megafauna, the word, is most familiar in relation to Ice Age giants or prehistorical giants. Okay, so now imagine Earth during the Ice Age. Okay, so if you've seen the movies Ice Age, Those were actually based on a real thing. Did you know that? Yep. So, the Ice Age was called the Pleistocene epoch. Okay? Pleistocene epoch. Yep. So that was a time of the Earth before we had, a lot of the animals that we have now. But interestingly enough, we did have humans. Just very early humans, which was really cool. So do you see on this slide, we have a giant wombat and a giant ground sloth, and they're huge. Most of these giants weighed over 2,200 pounds. That's the size of an elephant, and most of them are actually bigger, which is wild. So, woolly mammoths, right? Like Manny from Ice Age, roamed snowy plains. Just all over. Giant ground sloths lumbered through forests. Huge saber-toothed cats hunted massive prey. Some of these animals weighed way more than an elephant, right? A modern elephant. The world looked very different back then. It was super cool though. So, when this happened, it was really awesome. But between about 10,000 to 50,000 years ago, there was something that happened called the Great Megafauna Extinction. Extinction is what happens, it's what it's called when one species or more completely runs out, right? So, like the northern white rhino is functionally extinct because they have no more breeding males, okay? And so there's 2 left in the whole world, but we have no one to breed them to. So they're functionally extinct, okay? Due to hunting and over hunting, However, between 10,000 to 50,000 years ago, that was a long time ago, you guys. Like a long time ago. Many megafauna disappeared. Okay? About 80% of the largest animals disappeared. So that's 8 out of 10 animals disappeared. Climate change did play a role. Okay? So the Ice Age melting, right? We went through a global warming period. Yep. And when we did that, the Ice Age started to go away, right? All of the ice caps started melting and the glaciers receded. Okay. And when that happened, a lot of these big animals were very accustomed to cooler climates, right? They lived more north. They liked to be further up, right? Yeah. Now, here's the thing. Human hunting likely also played quite a large role as well, because humans needed to eat, right? And this was still in our hunter-gatherer phase for the most part. We had not hit the Neolithic Revolution yet, okay, which is a whole cool thing in and of itself, but we're going to learn about that later. Not in this video, but that's a different video, but it's really, really cool. So, with this happening, climate change, so the Ice Age was ending, human hunting. Humans were spreading across continents, okay? So this was Beringia, right? The land bridge between Europe and the North American continent was starting to melt, right? It was starting to flood. And so humans had already crossed over, and the humans that previously were already here were inundated with those humans, right? And so it's just crazy how many people were here for that time period. Now, compared to nowadays, not so crazy, but back then it was a lot, right? And all these animals were like, whoa, there's a lot of these little human things, and they just kept coming. So what's unusual about this is that it was mostly the large animals that disappeared. That's what makes this extinction event very unique, okay? So with this happening, it was really, really interesting. And so that's why scientists have put so much effort into learning these things. Okay, so let's keep going. So types of megafauna. So we have mega herbivores, okay? Plant eaters like the African elephant, the white rhinoceros, things like that, okay? We have mega carnivores like lions and cheetahs and tigers, things like that. And then we have mega omnivores, which eat both, right? So we have herbivores, which are plant eaters, carnivores, which are meat eaters, and then we've got omnivores. Omnivores eat both, okay? Like a brown bear or a black bear, right? They eat meat, they eat berries, they eat fruit, they eat honey, they eat anything they can get their hands on, okay? Humans are omnivores. Mhm. So, not all megafauna vanished, okay? We do still have some alive today, all right? We have elephants, giraffes, hippos, wild horses are megafauna. However, their habitats are still shrinking, okay? We even have bears and lions. But the problem is that with these habitats shrinking, many of them are living in much smaller areas than they used to. And because of that, we're having issues with human animal clashes. Okay, so like out west in the United States, in the western states, where people have ranches and they graze over the whole range, right? There's a big issue sometimes with farmers and ranchers getting into a discussion with the Bureau of Land Management about wild horses because the ranchers and the Bureau are trying to find an even playing field for who gets the grazing rights because those wild horses, that's their native home. But the ranchers also have to make a living and they have to make sure that their animals can be fed. And so the hard part is finding a fair solution that works for everybody in that solution. Okay. And again, we talked about this earlier, but because megafauna have slow reproduction rates, right? They don't recover as quickly if their populations shrink. Okay. So if they're overhunted, it makes them very vulnerable. Okay. So most megafauna are what scientists call K strategists. K is in the letter K. So this means they live really long lives. They have very few babies, and they invest a lot of care into each baby, which works really, really well unless something suddenly threatens them. Then it makes it really vulnerable, okay? Because while, mice and birds and rodents, squirrels, things like that, if something comes along and hunts a lot of those, guess what? They're still going to repopulate really, really fast because they have multiple babies every year. Megafauna generally have one baby every couple years, maybe. Like, did you know an elephant is pregnant for almost 2 years? 22 months. Yeah, that's more than double a human pregnancy. Yeah. So, that is when it becomes a big problem. Okay. But there's not just megafauna on land. The ocean has the biggest megafauna ever. The blue whale, the largest whale in the world, is the largest animal that's ever existed, ever, in the whole history of planet Earth that they've can find to this day, is the largest animal that's ever lived. And it's because it's 100 feet long on average. Okay? Now, a sperm whale is also enormous, but look at this picture here. See the person up in the top right corner of that little picture, that little teeny tiny person? That's a 6-foot tall person. And then down here over in the far left bottom corner, that's an elephant. That's an African bull elephant. And it looks tiny compared to a blue whale, doesn't it? It looks like your pet dog. But it's not. It's huge. It's craziness. So, the blue whale is bigger than dinosaurs. The blue whale is bigger than any land mammal. Water helps support their enormous bodies, which is why whales can grow so massive. So, ancient whale ancestors were once the size of dogs, okay? They were little. But over millions and millions of years, they've grown larger and larger. So in the ocean, being big can actually help you survive. Because did you know that the blue whale, despite being the largest mammal on the planet, actually eats krill, which is almost microscopic? Yep, they don't eat big things. So, like baleen whales, which is a blue whale. There's several different whales that are baleen whales, and the baleen is kind of like teeth for them, but not really. But if you look in the mouth of that blue whale there, you can see these things hanging down that look like teeth. It's kind of like a big brush. And so what they do is they gulp huge mouthfuls of water, and then they filter the water out through their baleen, and it traps all the krill in their mouth. And then they can eat them, you know? It's really kind of cool. And they strain out those tiny little plankton krill things. Okay? Now, when food is abundant, being bigger means you can collect more energy at once. Other whales, like sperm whales, dive really deep to hunt giant squid. Okay? So they dive really, 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 really deep to get those giant squid way down at the bottom. So in the ocean, size can be a powerful advantage, even sometimes on land, but it depends on what time you're looking at. So moving on, giant flightless birds. This is a cool topic too. After the dinosaurs disappeared, giant flightless birds evolved. Some were plant eaters, some were terrifying predators. Okay? However, you know what's interesting is that birds never grew as large as giant mammals. So while these birds are enormous, and being a person who is really terrified of birds that are larger than a, chicken, personally, they scare the living daylights out of me personally. But that's because, you get attacked by a chicken once or twice and it gets on your nerves, So you look at these giant birds and it's like, oh my gosh. But it's interesting that none of these birds ever grew larger than about 500 kilograms. Okay, which is like 1,000 pounds max, not even. Okay, which is half the size of an elephant, which, grant you, is huge, but not as big as the dinosaurs and all these other animals that were around. Okay, so the scientists think that eggshell strength might limit how big birds can get. Even evolution has its limits, which I think is interesting. So, then we have our giant turtles and tortoises. Okay? Giant tortoises once lived on almost every continent. Not Antarctica, but other than that, pretty much everywhere. So, some extinct species weighed over 2,000 kilograms. Yeah, that's crazy. That's like 4,000 pounds, guys. So, imagine a turtle the size of a small car. Isn't that nuts? I know. I mean, look at these pictures, right? So this one down here on the left is of the largest tortoise. Now, keep in mind, tortoises are land turtles. Turtles are ocean or water-going turtles, okay? Tortoises on land, turtles in water, right? Yes. So when you see like a box turtle on the road, that's a box tortoise, actually. Okay, so, I mean, can you imagine walking up to a tortoise the size of you? I mean, that's just crazy. A tortoise the size of an elephant. Wild. So, what happens when they disappear? When megafauna go extinct, guys, I'm really sorry about the panting. My dog Rory has just decided to barge in, so he's now on the video call as well. So here we are. So when megafauna go extinct, ecosystems change, right? So without those large plant eaters, trees grow thicker and wildfires become more common. Nutrients move less efficiently because they don't have the passage that they normally need. In places like the Amazon rainforest, nutrient movement dropped by over 98% after megafauna disappeared. That's a huge ecological shift, okay? Like massive ecological shift. So it's really, one little thing makes a huge difference across the time and the place that you're in. It's just amazing how much one disappearance affects the world. Megafauna and climate. So, here's the thing. When megafauna go extinct, ecosystems change. So without those large plant eaters, we talked about this, right? Trees grow thicker, wildfires become more common. So we went through something called the Younger Dryas period, okay? This was post the Ice Age, all right? So this was during the time that the large plant eaters kind of went extinct, okay? And so this is the large plant eaters, right? So currently our large plant eaters that produce the most methane gas are like cattle, right? So when megafauna went extinct, methane levels dropped. Okay. Climate may have cooled. All right. So this means that yes, while megafauna went extinct because it warmed up, when they went extinct, they stopped that methane level dropped because there was suddenly 80% less methane emissions on the planet, and so the climate was like, whoa, and so that means the climate probably cooled down again a little bit. And even today, livestock produce about 20% of our global methane emissions, which is something we can manage, but it's just something you have to keep in mind. It's not necessarily a bad thing or a good thing. It's just something that we have to keep in mind. Okay. So over here, if you want to pause the video, you can look at this image and there's a whole bunch of information about it right on there. Okay. So just, that's something to think about when you're going through these sorts of things. And when they produce methane gas during digestion, it really makes a big difference, so that's how giants can even influence the atmosphere, which is bananas, right? It's totally wild. So moving on. Why size matters, okay? So over on the right, you can see we have an image of a whole bunch of whales. This is the Cetaceae family, okay? This is the whale family. So see how some of them are enormous, like that blue whale down there at the bottom? And then way up top, you have whales that are the size of a human. Little tiny guys. Still big, but, in the scheme of things for whales, rather small. So they have bigger bodies. They need more food. They grow slowly. They recover slowly. Okay? In water, animals can grow bigger because water supports the weight and heat escapes slower. That's why whales can become enormous. Okay? So that's the whole reason that whales can be the size that they are. Does that make sense? And also, in regards to like water supporting weight and that sort of thing, that's why sometimes, you'll see, if you ever injure yourself, like if you hurt your leg or your back or something like that, the doctor might tell you, you know what, why don't you go try swimming? Because the water will take the pressure off of those joints and you can still exercise those muscles. And that will keep you from having a longer recovery time. Just like that. It's the coolest thing. So, things to think about. Okay, so here's some big questions to think about, right? Should humans help reintroduce large animals? What would happen if elephants disappeared, right? Could rewilding bring balance back? This is a lot of things that people are talking about right now because, like this image shows, they're reintroducing the European bison over in Europe. Okay, now bison is the big camelid. Now, a lot of us in the U.S. call the North American bison a buffalo. Technically, this is a misnomer. This is really, really not what they're called. Okay, a buffalo is like a water buffalo or a Cape buffalo. Okay, they're more related to cattle. Bison, not the same thing. But because they're called buffalo, it kind of confuses people sometimes. But you have to think about all of these things, okay? So these are some of those questions to think about. Being big has advantages. You have fewer predators. You have greater strength. You have the ability to travel long distances, okay? I mean, think about it. If you're a bison, it's going to be a lot easier to go 20 miles in a day than it is if you're a human, right? You're going to be worn out by the end of the day. But a bison, just another day. we're just tootling. But it also has risks. You need a ton of food. You reproduce more slowly. You can't hide very easily, okay? A bison cannot hide in a tree like a squirrel can, right? Right. Nature is always balancing trade-offs. So these are things that you just need to think about. It's not necessarily bad or good. It's just things to question. It helps you work on your critical thinking skills, okay? Critical thinking is something that you need to develop yourself. And that is to question things that are said, right? You need to find proof. You need to really investigate and really research things, okay? And find out what you believe, not what people tell you to believe, but what you personally believe, okay? So these are some questions that you should think about. Should humans help reintroduce large animals? Why? Why not? What do you think? What do you think would happen if elephants disappeared? What would happen? Who knows? What do you think? Tell us why. And then, could rewilding breed balance back? Rewilding is a term that they've introduced recently where they're trying to kind of return nature to where it was pre the Industrial Revolution, okay? Which is a whole nother video as well. So we'll go over that later. But just think about these things. So, why megafauna matter today, okay? So again, you see the North American bison there. Megafauna keep ecosystems balanced. They shape landscapes. They inspire humans, okay? Because you look at a bison and you're like, wow, that is amazing that they have survived for eons. I mean, they were around thousands of years ago, tens of thousands of years ago. I mean, you think about that and you're just like, oh my gosh. You think about these animals that have seen the world change, and it's amazing. They inspire human imagination. They also remind us that Earth once had giants, and we need to protect the ones that are left, right? So protecting our megafauna protects the entire ecosystem, okay? So protecting elephants or rhinos or lions or bison or anything doesn't just protect one species. It protects the entire ecosystem that they are a part of. So it's really important. And this is why we try to point out that there is so many things in the world that don't get talked about enough. And this is one of them. So our final thought, I want you to close your eyes and picture an Ice Age landscape. I want you to imagine walking across an Ice Age world. And as you're walking, you see woolly mammoths grazing. You see giant sloths climbing the big trees, or just rumbling across the ground. You see massive birds running across the plains. Megafauna weren't just big animals. They were ecosystem superheroes. Okay, I mean, that would be like walking through a field with Wolverine and Spider-Man and Iron Man and everyone else all in one field, and you're just like, oh my gosh, I don't even know what to do with myself. I mean, they are and were ecosystem superheroes, and that's how we should think about them. And today, the giants that remain still need our help, because when we protect the giants, we protect the world that they help build. Okay? And that's the world that we're trying to protect. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about this. So guys, I really hope you enjoyed that presentation. And I want to say thank you again for coming and for enjoying it, and let me know what you think. And I'm really glad you guys came, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And I will see you in the next video. Thanks. Bye.